So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Laura Wills and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Relations. I want to mention that I'll be recording this webinar for those unable to join us at this time so that they can watch it later. So I just want to make sure everybody is aware of that. I'm going to put everybody on mute for now. And if you'd like to ask a question at the end, please use the raised hand feature and I'll call on you and unmute you at the end of the presentation. So that's, I think, the easiest way for this to happen. Also during the presentation, I have some photos that I'll try to get in. And I found photos of the productions from the spring semester of most of your senior years, figuring that folks were probably in that one. So I wasn't able to find pictures from everybody that signed up, but most of you do. So with that, I hope you enjoy looking at those pictures. Now I'd like to welcome Professor Todd Wronski. Todd has been at Dickinson since 1987 and is an actor, director, and playwright. He has numerous professional credits for work both in the US and abroad. I listed his credits in the registration page of this event, and I don't want to take up all this time rereading them to you because I want Todd to have time to give his talk tonight and for everyone to have a chance to talk with Todd at the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd Wronski. Oh, wait.
You know, and at a distance, if you can imagine, you know, looking at you and then doing nothing but talking at you. I don't know if I'll be able to adjust to that mode, but I'll do the best I can. Really, what a great screen to look at. And so, well, but let's get going. The plan, I think, here today is I'll make some introductory remarks. Then I'll do a kind of a spiel, you know, because we're still intellectual no matter where we are, and we love new ideas. And boy, am I going to bring some. Well, no, old ideas, but a nicely collected assortment of old ideas, as well as then saving time at the end to take a look, have some discussion in terms of where are we going? Where's this thing that we know and love that we've done that has been such a significant part of who we are, both individually and together? Where in the blue blazes might it be going? I'm hoping you guys have the answers on that one. So again, some introduction, then a background of things, discussion at the end as we look forward. I decided to start up here because some of you may not have been back in some time. And what I thought, where do I begin? As good as any, one of the spaces we're most proud of and pleased of is our costume shop. For those of you who may not be aware, some years ago, in the late 90s, we moved into what's Montgomery House, and is soon to be renamed after somebody less complicated in their history than John Montgomery has turned out to be. But we are in the top of that. It used to be the Spanish House, I think, when many of you guys were here. Or those of you who go way back, when we get to my office, I had a visitor from Emeritus visiting campus, and he said, "Hey, this is Dieter Rolfink's old living room." Dieter, a longtime professor, had been in this building when it was faculty housing. It's got a long, distinguished career, and now it's even got more distinguished stuff going on, including our costume shop operation. And what I'm going to do, like I say, is just talk a little bit, or just talk and walk downstairs now, because actually this building and our location in it, we're going down the stairs now, and our location in it really harkens, or is really a kind of emblematic, really, of some of the changes that have happened in academic theater in the past. In fact, when we made the decision to come here, we were there at that point in the old ESSA. This is our conference room down here with a library. When Dave Brubaker, some of you from his time with us, when Dave passed on, he left us his book collection and a program collection, and that forms the basis of a really nice kind of browsing library and that sort of thing for our students, as well as, again, a seminar and meeting space, all of which is empty right now and not being used. But it will rise again. There we come through here. some of you I know some of you are from the era where Sue Meehan and I were sitting at those steel desks staring at each other. Poor Sue having to do work all day long, listening to me about 6 feet away from her. We shared the rainbow computer between us in that room. And then the other faculty were in the subdivision off of the dressing room. But now, again, this is the command station that our current department coordinator, Jenny Rhodes, operates from. And suffice it to say, every era has its wonderful aspects of it, but certainly there are distinctive things about what we are doing as a department now that again, reflect some of the changes. Again, going from our little shared office behind the box office. And this is my current office here with some of the things from, I'll admit to be nostalgia once in a while, but it's a beautiful, beautiful office for which I'm very thankful. And I will sit myself down. I should have had this on. And then we'll kind of cruise through a little bit of academic theater. So here we are sitting down. Now, as I said, we were faced with a choice. We were our offices moved from the hub. Many of you can remember Dave and Marge in that production office. And when I came, that was where we were operating, growing. We added in dance. There were a number of things that were going on that made things a little tight. And we moved over to the basement of the old SAE house, now known as Biddle House. And it seemed like, oh, wow, our ship had come in. But it also, it proved to be a nice transitional space. But we were faced with the administration saying, you need other space. And they gave us a choice of what's now the Asbel Center. I think it used to be Alpha Psi, didn't it? The house between the admissions house and Weiss Center. Or we could take Montgomery, which is right behind Mathers. And one of the discussions we had at that point was that, well, what about the future? Where is theater in the academic realm going, and where are we specifically going as a department? And one of the things was, well, we certainly are working increasingly with the arts departments, and might not that proximity be helpful in terms of interdisciplinary work and our status as it were an academic department. But on the other hand, here, distinctively, not uniquely, but distinctively, we also have a very vital tradition of the Mermaid Players and of Esprit de Corps and people working without academic credit at all hours of the night, just for the love of it, that kind of thing. And very appropriately, I think at the time when Dave was asked where he wanted his theater to be, he said the student union. And I think those of you who knew him and knew his love for, the students and the kind of thing that was going on there, it was superb. Well, practical circumstances, I think practical considerations basically pushed us, thankfully, here into Montgomery. And you can see from upstairs with the costume shop, it's one of the most pleasant costume shops I've ever been in, both visually, atmospherically, and functionally, and they have candy up there. So we are here, and we continue to be a department that you wouldn't want to say is all things to all people, but we like to balance out a number of factors, all of which we've, I guess, inherited as a theater has developed its place in the academics, in the academic theater realm. So some people are really sometimes surprised to learn that theater is a very relatively recent entry into higher education, into college and university as an academic subject. Been here for a long time as an activity. This is also true, I'll bring in every once in a while a little counter or referential things from England. It's the same thing there. Harvard or Oxford and Cambridge do not offer degrees in theater. And in fact, in the United States, for many times, or for much of the 20th century, the Ivy League kind of considered itself not above theater, but they stood apart from theater as an academic discipline. But before we get up to that, let's just start at the beginning, as it were. And so in America, the first degree granting institution, the first thing that would grant a degree in theater was Carnegie Tech, right here in Pennsylvania, by golly. Now, what's interesting is, again, Carnegie Tech, then again, as the name implies, a technical institute that's later to emerge emerge after merging, I guess, as Carnegie Mellon University. It's interesting that it started in a technical institute because, theater, as you know, there's a whole lot that goes in there, except in addition to the theory. You can know things and you can write your dissertation on things and stuff like that. You got to know how things go together. And it's one of the things that we're trying to, we verify that even with our remote teaching, we've been shipping showing machines and toolkits off to people through UPS because we got to teach how you do it. And I think it's interesting that Carnegie Tech was the first in 1914. They only for a bit, but it started out as a technical training program, but that did give a degree. Now, about that same time, there was going on at Harvard, the George Pierce Baker, who's a big name in theater education. He went to Harvard as a student and sort of never left. He just got on rather well, as they say, and was teaching English, and teaching English then turned into studying plays, which turned into the opportunity to mess around with writing new plays. I mean, one of his students was a guy, maybe you've heard of him, I don't know. I mean, but Eugene O'Neill studied in that program, and S.N. Perlman, and a lot of the writers, George Kaufman, a lot of the writers that would later emerge in the 30s were all in what was called Playwriting 47, which was an English course. And this is the first emergence. This is the first strain of emergence, as it were, for theater. And it comes in from the East Coast tradition, and I won't say the blue blood, set, but certainly the Ivy League. And that is that the English departments go from the study of literature to the generation of literature in terms of, in this case, creative writing. But then, of course, you're writing plays. What next? It becomes the Theater 47, which was basically a non-credited and later, as I understand, semi-credited kind of program that George Pierce Baker sets up to produce plays. They're producing plays on campus, most of which was an outgrowth of the playwriting class. Nonetheless, you had for the first time at a prominent institution, theater and production of theater, rather than being show business, was considered something, to study seriously. So that went on for a number of years, again, up through the World War I. We get into the 20s, and Baker is still going on. The people are coming back from World War I, where changes are in the offing, and he's trying to say, listen, let's set up a degree program in the theater. Well, you can believe it. Harvard said, no, that's not what we do. We don't do trades. We don't do that stuff, making things and stuff like that. And fair enough, that's up to them. But what George Pierce Baker did then was he decamped to Yale University, and Yale does become a linchpin in the first phase of American educational theater. Because George Pierce Baker goes there, they start the Yale School of Drama, I'm just thinking back and I'm looking at folks signed on here and wondering if anyone is a Dickinson alum or a Dickinson / Yale alum. And I know we've got Amy Morse is one that comes to mind, who did go from Dickinson to the Yale School of Drama. Again, Yale School of Drama, some folks, and of course, you guys all know Karen Kirkham. She's a product of Karen Lordy Kirkham is also a product of Yale University. So it has populated then and now the higher echelons of theater in a very consistent way. And George Pierce Baker comes out of this. Now, the thing I guess I'd kind of emphasize, or kind of the framing that I would give this, is that English department, studying the literature of it, starting to perform the literature so that you could understand it as literature better. Like, think of how the typical professor, I think, from this tradition would say, think of how much you will understand the structure of this play and be able to write about it if you actually produce it. So in a way, they studied the play in order to write about it. Many times, or they produced the play in order to kind of study it. Many other things later on would be, well, we study it in order to produce it better. That's a fundamental kind of contrast in viewpoints that draws a distinction between programs these days. Okay, so you get into the 20s, you get into the Depression too, for that matter, and you got a different political tradition working in the country and that sort of thing, especially in the Midwest. And those of you, I don't know if anyone comes from Wisconsin and has tales of Robert La Follette and the progressive movement out there. I come from an area of the country, Minnesota, where Hubert Humphrey becomes mayor of Minneapolis in the 40s, and then later becomes a huge national political leader. But it's characterized by a very progressive mindset politically, and a very vigorous and electric approach to public speaking. Well, it was just a very central thing. And I'm not expert enough on general popular culture to say why perhaps that public speaking, especially in the political circle in the Midwest, was so distinctive, but it sure was. It may have been because the newspaper media were not quite as strong, or the broadcasting things were not as strong an element as in the highly populated East. I don't know. But here's what happens, is that the Midwest, I don't know, again, as some of you I think are from out near God's country there, but what happens is that speech becomes a linchpin of the academic realm in the Midwest. I was going to say before it becomes one in the East. In my humble opinion, I'm surprised at the degree to which public speaking is not present even now in Eastern school curriculums, certainly compared to the Midwest. I'm not going to be critical, of course, of Dickinson, but we had some experiments with Center for Public Speaking, things like that over the years. Rich Lewis, many of you may have studied with him. He's been as an adjunct doing one course a year, which is like gold. People rush to get in, and it can only accommodate a limited number of people. But in the Midwest, I myself and a majority of schools that especially liberal arts schools, will have a requirement of public speaking later broadened out to different areas of speech. There would also be huge contests that were sometimes arranged by the same entities that arranged school athletic competitions. We would have the Big Nine athletic conference would have a big speech contest that was an analogous thing to the football playoffs. The Minnesota State High School League that did all of the state tournaments in all sports would also have, speech contests that would go up to the state level. This was let off educationally, and still, even to today, people look significantly toward one institution in terms of speech, and some of you guys may know this, but that is Northwestern University. Northwestern University comes out in the post-war period and is just as it were a colossus, and educates so many people in the speech tradition. But at the same time, the speech starts broadening out. What's one of the first ones? Well, it's oral interpretation is an area of speech forensics, right? Well, oral interpretation, then of course gets into poetry, then soon is dramatic interpretation. Then, well, let's let them actually have two people maybe do scenes. And pretty soon, the speech realm out there that's so developed both as an expressive and a competitive kind of exercise, it starts to become imbued with drama. Now, even in the present day, those of you who know the wonderful Bob Falls, his productions, Brian Dennehy's Death of a Salesman recently on Broadway, Bob Falls director, it's just unbelievable, just so beautiful. Or Frank Galati, those of you who may have had the pleasure of seeing our production of the Grapes of Wrath out at the College Farm, site-specific presentation, really a kick. But Frank Galati, who did that presentation, he comes out of Northwestern University. Mary Zimmerman, the big auteur, director of Metamorphosis and other things. So Northwestern still is kind of a seedbed of an integrative thing where theater, speech, and in the case of Mary Zimmerman, performance art is melded together. So you've got that. And those two traditions. Now, let's maybe come a little bit more close to home. The other thing that you have that is hugely rich, both here and again in England as well, is the drama club, the tradition of people basically putting on plays because they have to, because, well, that's what I do, sometimes, I don't know, you guys, I'm sure when you were here at Dickinson, I'm sure you probably all had occasion where some relative at Thanksgiving or something say, why do you spend so much time doing that? And the answer seems self-evident to us here, but boy, trying to explain it to somebody who doesn't get it here, trying to explain it in logical terms sometimes is a true challenge. But suffice it to say that Dickinson was not alone in very early efforts, and we actually have recently had to study that because we're kind of trying to plan a little 75th anniversary shindig, and where the Mermaid Players took over from the previous drama clubs that were here, and where the previous drama club took over from mostly fraternity-based drama contests. Those are all sort of not lost in, but they're somewhat misty and mysterious given the haze of time that we look through. But suffice it to say, the club drama is particularly vital and has a very storied tradition out in the East Coast. Like I say, academic programs in the Midwest, not totally, but almost. It just so many cases as to be the default guess whenever you look at a program would come out of academic speech programs, because speech was considered a respectable academic discipline out there by World War II. And certainly when you get the GI Bill and other things kicking in and the explosion of enrollments in the early 60s, you had that. And most academic programs in the Midwest would be like, I majored in theater, but I double majored in a degree called speech and theater, in which you could get certified as a public teacher. Why? Because everyone had speech requirements in high school. The two are very intertwined. In the East, you have a different tradition. And let's take a look at Dickinson, for instance, because the club drama then comes along parallel with, but usually surprisingly not really integrated with English departments sometimes. Sometimes you had English departments that indirectly Yale School of Drama grew out of. But many times, I remember teaching at Wake Forest for a year as a visiting professor, and the Shakespeare teacher there discouraged his students from getting involved in all that drama thing, because he said that'll just distract you from the real meaning of Shakespeare, he would say, which is on the page. Far be it from me to be critical, but he was fun to go out with for a drink or two and did have a sense of humor about himself. Thankfully, impossible not to like a person like that, even if you disagree with their premise. So anyway, the point is Dickinson and the program that later grew into the Mermaid Players was over in Denny Hall, sort of at the other end of the building from the UPS room, from the 317 or the UPS room as we call it. And that was Dave. Dave was hired again. He was an actor down at the Ellenberry Playhouse, as many of you know, which is a local theater. And he was brought on essentially to bring together and up the game of the Mermaid Players, a longstanding drama club. And that tradition then brings a lot of programs. It's the Mustard and Cheese Society at Mount St. Mary's. It's the Cap and Dagger at Bucknell. There are all kinds of with mustard and cheese. There are many colorful things, these traditional societies. I will say, and this is a double-edged sword, some people would call it old-fashioned, some people would call it out of date. I prefer to say traditional, but I think our department over certainly my time here has, again, you could say hung on to, but I would say nurtured and tried to keep healthy this tradition that we've inherited, which is so rich, of the drama club. I'm just as proud of and amazed by the Mermaid Players as a student organization as I am proud of and amazed by the Department of Theater and Dance as an academic institution. And trying to kind of keep that balance and that sort of thing is, of course, one of the real challenges that we face every time we look very carefully at, which we do frequently, at who are we now and how do we prepare for that which we want to become or need to become. Certainly those kind of deliberations right now have been both amplified, the urgency of them, and made much more difficult by the current situations of the coronavirus and some of the other challenges facing higher education. What's interesting with how Dickinson went through, and this is comparable to many schools in the East, but not in the Midwest. That is, how do you transition from this, Mustard and Cheese or Cap and Dagger or Mermaid Players to an academic department? Now, Harvey Powers up at Bucknell, the kind of the long time, overseer of that program, was basically an English professor who then decided, I won't say to go rogue, but basically said, I'm going to start doing these things and you're starting to give credit. And so that many times the English department would be happening in that way. But then other one, and this is something for many of you guys who are probably of this era know it, but those of you who maybe inherited some of this, Dickinson was a little different in that when Dave was hired, he was hired to do the drama club, to be the director of the Mermaid Players, but he also did a course each semester, of this, as did Marge, and little by little then, some formal education and credited activity became a part of and intertwined with the Mermaid Players. Little by little, that kind of proceeds. And what really made Dickinson, and I will say distinctive rather than unique, but to my knowledge, unique. And certainly when I came here, I said, Core blimey, this is unbelievable. And what was going on was this. I came here and we had 8 different faculty members whose primary research in their field of modern languages was drama. We had Enrique Martinez Vidal, we had Dieter Rolfink, we had Bev Eddy, who wrote her dissertation on Ibsen, as I recall. We had Wolfgang Miller and connections with East German theater. And I don't want to go through all of these. But so Dave astutely, well, if you got soil, it'll grow tomatoes, plant tomatoes. And what he developed was an ingenious hybrid degree program called Studies in Dramatic Theater, Studies in Drama, Studies in Theater and Dramatic Literature. It was his 4 courses that first Margin, he, and then later Jim Drake, and then later Sheila Garvey, and some of these other people. It was those courses which were limited, where they're limited because it wasn't a department, it wasn't an academic department. What happened was, and that grows, that the core curriculum is there. And then at the time I raised, 6 out of the 10 courses would be taken with people like Dieter, people like Enrique, Spanish drama. Of course, Bill Harms then says, well, come to think of it, I'm trained in, 18th century English literature. Drama's a lot more fun than that. And then Bill Harms becomes a long-standing contributor to that program, as does Dave Kranz, who was hired as our Shakespeareanist. And so basically, it was one of the slowest crossfades, just incremental change, rather than Harvey just saying, I'm doing this. It was incremental change that I was a good, which I had the good fortune, not alone, of course, but I had good fortune to fall into when I applied for this job. I knew it was a nice liberal arts college. It was a kind of institution I wanted to go out. I didn't know, you never know out east where they are on this continuum. And if that wasn't, a clever, opportunistic, and I think wise way to basically create drama that would become an academic, staple of the curriculum. The other thing that kind of rounds this out is the other part of our academic program, and that is our dance program, which when I arrived, and I don't know exactly with Dave or Sheila or anyone from Dave Peck's era out there, anyway. But we were right in the middle of deliberations of, do we put dance or do we leave dance basically as a teacher, which is there was one teacher, and do we leave that credit in the phys ed department, or do we bring it into the theater program and give, at that time was called dramatic arts credit for the dance, and the decisions were made to bring our dance teacher at that time, Christine Villardo, for any of you who remember Christine. Oh, what a lively, lovely person. But so Christine then comes in as this happened, and this also happened all across the country. The migration of dance from phys ed into theater programs makes, if not the art complete, it certainly rounds out the circle of expressivity, which curricularized art can be looked upon as. And so now we're sitting here, we're sitting in Montgomery House, we're sitting in a situation which both medically, politically, and economically is going to impose, I think, significant change, perhaps in the short term, but it looks with every day that passes, and with every social movement that rightfully demands attention, it looks like there's permanent change in the offing. I could further theorize about this for your edification, but like I say, I'm hoping you solve it for me. That kind of brings us up a little bit to the present day, and what we're facing. And I guess I'll turn it back over to Laura. So if she can kind of moderate, send her questions and that sort of thing, or she can call on you. I guess you can use your little raise hand function. And so let's chat a little bit.
All right. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please use your raise hand function, and I will unmute you as I see people coming in. And actually what I can do in the meantime, while people are thinking of questions, I can share my screen. I have gathered a few photos, one of some of Dave Brubaker, I found a fun photo from a dramatic club in the 20s. So I'm going to share my screen. Just give me a moment here. One only host. Okay. Here we go. Share. So I'll just go through some fun photos while you guys are looking at, you guys are coming up with some questions. Some old photos. Are you guys seeing these? Okay. There we go. Here's the Dramatic Club from 1929. And then I just pulled some various production photos from around the years that our participants are joining us from. I couldn't find everybody's, so I apologize for that, but these are some fun ones. I hope some of you who are on maybe see yourselves in these. Todd, I'm sure you've got stories on a bunch of these.
Well, what's interesting too is some of those in the 70s come back in the 90s and that sort of thing, as you see.
Oh.
With Moon Children or Rhymers of Eldritch. Oh, that lovely production we had of that.
Some of these blown up or a little bit greeny, so I apologize for that. Love this little cartoon puppet.
Oh, Mary Ignatius, that's Michael Nasser's sort of independent production, as I recall, was put on in ATS. I love Mike Nasser too, still going at it. Oh.
Now we finally get to color. Look at those bright colors, they're beautiful. And then I pulled from the Dance and Theater website, the productions over the years. So I'll scooch through these. There's just 4 or 5 screens of these, and then we'll get to questions.
Or observations too, as you sit and think.
Sure.
Where are we heading? You guys are in different places. What you see depends on where you stand, and I'm waiting to hear, man.
That's right. I think I've got one more, and then we'll get to questions. So those are some fun things that I found. And I'll stop sharing and we'll go back. I see some questions here. So we'll start with Laura. I will ask you to unmute and you can ask your questions.
Hi
there. How are you? Just COVID knocked me out of a conference in Orlando that I was going to go to, Modern Drama Conference, you know, and come back to Rollins where this whole thing started for me teaching.
This is the wrongest of wrong things. It's unfair. It's uncool. I don't appreciate it one bit.
Yeah. How lovely to see you.
Oh, it's lovely to see you. So, okay, my question is, now with the proliferation of having to create theater on a virtual level, how much do you think that's going to change instruction in college? Because we certainly did our share of projection and performing for stage and interpreting text and whatever, but we never really did any acting for film or acting for Zoom or doing any of those things, learning how to read a teleprompter, that kind of thing. How do you think that's going to change the educational experience in a dramatic arts curriculum?
Well, and that's a big one. If I had my prognostication, and if I look at the way different things have grown out of different traditions, dance being a notable exception, it just plain grew out of phys ed and went into theater, pretty straightforward. But yeah, how we deal with film is an open-ended question, both for a school like Dickinson and larger institutions, that sort of thing too. And what I see is our 2 trends, one of which is it coming out of sort of a conscious merging of efforts by visual art and dramatic programs, theater arts, to get together and say, we've got to address this, because yeah, you're absolutely right, Laura. I mean, you know me, I can be a little traditional and reactionary in my impulses every once in a while. And for some reason, I haven't grown out of it. But we can resist. But we're stupid to think that that we can be like King Canute and hold back this tide. And it's just the way people take in information. So it has to be done. And I think one of the things, and this is where, again, even back, 20 years ago, and we said, where should we cast our physical ore here? There were a lot of impulses, which again, luckily we got great colleagues in visual art, that kind of thing will be happening and is happening. Another thing that's interesting though, is that film has become the other stream flowing into what will eventually become the river of media, production, is from film studies. And as film studies basically takes a premise of a derivative of literary study, and film as text. And so there's a lot of jockeying that'll go on. But I think, as with so many things, this COVID it's just going to speed everything up. It's just going to speed everything up, because we've been sitting here, well, I've been sitting here, my colleagues try to keep me moving along gently, but nonetheless, we've been sitting there saying, well, but plays. Oh.
Believe me, we've been sitting here saying the same thing.
Yeah. but we can sit and whine all we want, and our crocodile tears can turn into elephant tears. Not that either of those tears are bad. I'm not saying privileging one thing over next, but we can be that same way. But that ain't going to change anything. And so I do think that, some of the finished business, it's going to speed up. And because we're now producing, we've got a wonderful thing, a presentation that we're live streaming on November 20th, which is called The Quilt, and it is bringing source material from every which way, and that's part of the future. And I'm really excited that we have other people who are really going to be able to be capable in those areas. And so
it's one of those things where now actors not only have to act, but they also have to film, and they have to edit, and they have to upload. There's an entire new science of technology that has come into what we actually think of as the most basic in-person experience that you can have, that now you have to be able to do.
Well, and just when a lot of you out there perhaps I'm still bitter about the Patti LuPone Sweeney Todd for a number of reasons, one of which it took away our rights when we had the thing planned. We had a perfect cast and we couldn't get the rights because of Patti LuPone's tour. But another reason made me bitter was, what? Triple threat isn't enough anymore? You've got to play instruments too? And just when I thought it couldn't get me any more outrageous, and just when I thought that actors' creativity, which is so unbelievably awesome, couldn't be stretched any further to any more impressive lengths, this comes along. And now, where's your reel? Get this thing out. Show us this. Right. It will continue to push, and it will continue to push us faster. Yeah. And where that leaves institutions like Dickinson, which again, we tend to still be grounded in a fairly traditional liberal arts education, which tends not to be vocationally oriented. Whether that changes our orientation, or whether we decide, well, we don't have the financial, the technical, the philosophical wherewithal to embrace this new, vocabulary with the caress that with the real genuine affection that the caress needs. There are some institutions I think they may opt out. I do think the future of our department, if I had to guess, is very much pro in terms of not even, well, if we have to, we will. I think we have either consciously or sometimes unconsciously put ourselves in a position where I think the transitions that are coming up are not going to be easy, but at least they'll be possible. Yeah. Terrific. And again, Orlando area, I'm sure, has been hit like everywhere. Hang in there. And one of these days, I'm going to get down there and surprise you.
I would love that. I'm waiting for the day.
I've been waiting to go back to Orlando for ages.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to ask Carolyn Oppenheim to ask her question.
Hi, Carolyn Gowing. For anybody who doesn't remember from 94, hi Todd. First of all, I comment on the fact that you look and sound exactly the same, and I am. People
have been waiting for it to change, but they're not. It's not going to give up hope. Yeah, thank you.
But one of the things that has struck me, and I'm not sure I have a question in here, but I'm just going to say it struck me as you were going through sort of the timeline of Dickinson and how was I guess during our time, in that mid-90s time, sort of that was sort of I feel like the beginning of the dance theater movement. Natalie and everything that came along, Natalie Marone and everything that came along with that time period. And also, I think for our class, this wide variety of things that we did. And I feel like in 94, we had, people who were doing costumes, and not just the theater, but like all parts of the theater. And so I feel like the tradition for Dickinson, and maybe I'm wrong, but it was certainly how I got my first job out of school, which was I did everything. I didn't just act. I worked on Sunset Boulevard. And so I didn't just act. I didn't just direct. I did lights, and I did sound, and I did costumes because you made me. And so there was a bunch of everything. And I think that I'm hoping for you all and theater in general, that you will encompass this new part of it, this new unknown world of, as Laura was saying, there's to the tech of it and all of the stuff for theater that you're going to have to come into. So I applaud that I know that you don't know it, maybe you don't know it or you don't understand, but it was everything to us. We saw everything, and it pushed us forward when we were young, out of school, skipping some finals to go to a job interview. And
That's what you gotta do.
Well, I got the job. So, I think that Dickinson has been for a long time well positioned to do many, many things for their students. So I'm wishing you all luck on moving forward with this next one.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. And that when we look back to it's with that in mind, one thing we are you can imagine the number of creative people and input that goes in as our department has now grown. We are 7 strong in terms of faculty line and that sort of thing with dance as well. And we've got all kinds of multiplicities of impulses and creative intuition and stuff like that. But I think one thing is, our majors still have to take, our dancers still have to take acting class, and they're not liking that any better than they ever did. And our actors have to take the modern dance, and I have to say they are liking that maybe a little better than they used to. But they still have to, do that whole thing. And how we incorporate this, again, not only new, but quite complicated and quite rapidly changing, both in terms of equipment and technique. Some of these things, how we do that in. I think when we look at the next thing, because everybody's wondering what do we do? Hubs do for renovation. Mathers, as much as we love it, it is what it is. And I would venture to say that the future probably holds more of a laboratory, kind of square shed, in which cool things happen of all kinds, because
like going back to the black box.
Pardon?
Going back to the black box.
Well, that those of you who've been with us with the you talked about the 90s. One of the big things was what happened was the opening of the Cube. Did you get that, or you just missed that, Carolyn? The Cubiculo. That was 98. Pardon? It
was after me.
That was a huge step forward to us too. But we could go down memory lanes, plural. I mean, we could be driving around in a psychological Perry County for a long time here. Let's not. But nonetheless, like you say, I appreciate the kind words, and that multiplicity of things, I dare say, is the calling card of a lot of good schools like ours, a lot of programs like ours, but I think ours in particular. Mostly because we have a tradition of not being competitive with each other, as teachers and that sort of thing. And that the kind of student we draw is somebody who tends to be looking for answers, plural, rather than the answer or the thing that I will do, but rather, how do I think about all these things? So thank you. Thank you. How great to see you. Again, I was just telling somebody about your work coming up to A Street for us every once in a while with the kids when Karen was
That's right.
Start.
Oh my God, I don't even want to think about it.
Played tennis with Luke. He's 30 years old, for Pete's sake.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Anyway,
lovely to see you.
All right, next we have Colleen Haggerty-Bunn. Hi, Todd.
Hey, Colleen. Oh, great to see you. And you know all about this speech stuff, don't you?
I do. Did you see me nodding my head?
And I won't say that the East isn't good at it, because I know, that was a big thing for you and you were very successful. But in the Midwest, like, it's coming out of people's ears.
It is.
Colleen was very involved in forensics and that sort of thing here. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. One, I want to echo what Carolyn said around making sure that we were well-rounded in our department. I started in Jim Drake's set lab, and I was in a skirt and he handed me a circular saw and said, "Go cut some wood." So I never came to set building in anything other than jeans after that. But here's my question. So I'm good friends with I was just previously at Susquehanna University. That's where I was just working. And I became good friends with one of their faculty members who is their activist writer in residence. So she has a dual appointment in English and in theater. And so what I'm wondering about is, do you see more activist, responsive writing coming out of departments than you ever have seen in the past? One of the things that Monica did was write a play for students and faculty and staff to perform around women's suffrage and the 100-year anniversary of the 19th Amendment. So, and they did it in the spring, actually needed to make edits to it over the summer because of Black Lives Matter and the protests and things that were happening, and then performed it again via Zoom, which was very interesting this past a couple of weeks ago. So I'm just wondering if you're seeing more of that activist responsive theater happening than you've had in the past.
Certainly, if you go to conferences, which I won't say I don't, but I try to minimize the degree in which I go, I still need to know what's going on. And I do. And the last conferences I've been to, you realize that has become, if not front and center, certainly merging very, I won't say aggressively, but merging with great gusto, I think, into programs that are more traditional and interpretively based in terms of taking an existing script and doing that. And certainly we're no exception. We move forward. And those of you who, again, like I say, check us out in November on the web. But right now, for instance, we have the great pleasure of working with colleague who, those of you from the Karen Lordy / Kirkham era, she's in England right now. And with our study abroad programs that, are, let's just put it this way, somewhat limited to the degree that they will run traditionally. But she has been replaced with great gusto by Carrie Miller, who comes to us both a MFA in acting and a PhD in theory from Ohio State University. And she has been, I think, a real effective advocate for introducing the kinds of maybe process-oriented and developmental work, ensemble created work, and that sort of thing, devised drama, all of which certainly, I think that maybe when you look at the future, certainly what looks like it from this cultural moment, but I only say a moment, it's not enough to be a trend like I believe the film studies are, or that increasing media literacy in theater faculty. Those are trends that are bona fide now. But if I had to look at it right now, the moment certainly is one where work like yours, like what you described, is becoming more and more prominent. And in many places, say Trinity College in Hartford or Bard or some of these Bennington that have very vital creative writing traditions. It's happened even more. It's I won't say have taken over, but has become dominant rather than prominent. But yeah, you make a real good point, and I think there are a number of reasons why that's emerging right now. But it's certainly the thing in the moment that I think we're most consciously addressing in the moment, Now, in the long run, how that all, shakes out really depends on a lot, I hate to say it, but where the jobs are, what the marketplace becomes, what happens to the American regional theater, many times, which is sort of the bellwether upon which we roughly base what we teach, in terms of skill sets. A lot of variables there, but yep, you hit a big one. It's not the elephant in the room that no one talks about. It's just a very sizable, healthy presence that we're sort of blessed to have and challenged to keep healthy, while at the same time weighing out these other priorities that we talked about earlier. Yeah, neat. Ceiling scroll, right? Yeah, up there, just great. Oh, I didn't know you were that close. You need to get back here more often.
I know. I saw Sherry last winter, I think,
okay.
at the I came down for the common read. So
okay.
Yeah, I promise I will try and get down a little bit more often. I'll stop by Montgomery.
You can't shame people when they show up for a webinar, for Pete's sake, on a weeknight. So it's so lovely of all of you guys to make this. Yeah, Laura, anybody else up?
I don't see any other raised hands or any questions in chat that I can throw out to you. Does anybody have anything else before we close for the evening? Any memories you want to throw out there? I'm not seeing any. So, yeah.
Folks, sometimes you think nothing changes, that we're all destined to repeat the same Groundhog Day forever and ever and ever and that sort of thing, and that how can progress be made in this world that we're living in and this choice that we're making electorally and all that. But look at this. I don't know if you can see that. Is it reflecting? Oh.
There you go.
7:59. 7:59. We were aiming for 8 o'clock. We're bringing this thing at 7:59. We're not long-winded. We're disciplined, on message, and so deeply appreciative to just see those smiling faces on the screen. It's even better than the Hollywood squares. The whole screen lit up with beautiful celebrities in their own lives, and it's just what a kick. What a kick.
We do have some questions here. Connie Rockman.
Hi, I just wanted to thank you for all the shout out to Dave Brubaker. I'm from back in the Brubaker years in the mid 60s. And the memory I have to share when you put the list of plays up was Measure for Measure in the spring of 64.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
When the guy who was playing the Duke got deathly sick the week before the show was going up. And Dave Brubaker learned the part and went on and played that part in all the productions. He was he was phenomenal. But I have one other memory. I knew that Dave had an identical twin brother who worked out in Ashland, Oregon. And about 5 years ago, I had a chance to go to the Shakespeare Festival in Ashland, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And I remembered that, and I went to the office and asked them if Ed Brubaker was still around. And unfortunately, he had passed on, but there was a huge portrait of him in the office at the Ashland Shakespeare Festival. And of course, it was Dave. I mean,
oh my God.
They were identical twins. And there was a story about the time they played in Comedy of Errors at Allenbury. And, you know, they came in from different sides of the stage and people couldn't believe this guy that looked like he was the same person it was just, there's so many Brubaker stories.
Aww.
It's lovely to know that you're carrying on his tradition so beautifully.
Well, thank you. He inspires a person to do that. He played King Lear for us in one of the early years here, and we had a wonderful time working together. I have to say, when Dave passed on, we had a memorial service in Mathers Theater, and I thought it was lovely and that sort of thing. And I kind of officiated along with Jim Drake, and but Ed was there. And
I
a lot
heard
of people didn't know that Dave had an identical twin brother. And you know, a lot of identicals aren't identical. These guys were identical.
exactly.
And people came who hadn't seen Dave for years. And it was, I mean, you shouldn't be laughing at a funeral, but Dave would want us to. People just, and they come up, they wouldn't know what to say. And I had to say, no, that's Ed Brubaker. That's his identical twin. Yeah.
The story
Great
I
man.
heard from somebody who was there, Ed got up and said, "Hello, friends. I thought you might like to hear the voice one more time."
Yeah. Inflection.
Amazing individuals.
Well, thank you for your thoughts and memories.
Gail Marks.
Yeah, I was just going to say that was the weirdest, spookiest thing when Ed Brubaker was like, yoo-hoo.
Yep. Yeah, and interesting contrast too with Ed and his work at F&M versus, you know, in as I recall it, more in a traditional English department. And then, he had a more, as it were, academic and artistic training. And Dave, pretty much, you know, Mr. Allenberry, and he came to it from get the thing up on stage, get it going. All of that summer stock came handy when he had to memorize the Duke that quickly. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, Todd, I actually worked with Ed Brubaker at the Fulton Opera House in Lancaster when I was in high school.
Oh.
Because that's what I did in my time, my extra time. And so the first time I saw David Brubaker at Dickinson, I was like,
Yeah.
and he had obviously no idea who I was, and I didn't know that there was a twin, and it was a lot confusing.
Yeah. Great times. Great guy.
Aww. One person, Allison McPhail, said this was so informative. I have a theater kiddo and wish I was braver and continued my high school theater there. Great to hear about the college work and the depth and breadth of the program and its future.
Okay.
So I don't have any more questions. Anybody else before we close for the evening? Seeing none, I will thank Todd. Thank you very much for doing this for us this evening. Thank you to all the participants for joining us. I know Todd was so anxious to see everybody. And I hope to see you too, again, either at another virtual event or in person, hopefully soon. And with that, I think we'll close it for this evening. And I thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Have a good evening.
Great to see you all. Good night.
Take care.